Hello, and welcome to the next in our study of women in the Bible. Today we're in the book of 2 Kings, and we're staying in chapter 4 for both characters. The first character that we're looking at is the prophet's widow. This unnamed widow, for whom the prophet Elisha performed a miracle, it would seem on all evidence, a believer in God, as evidenced by her strict obedience to the prophet's instructions. Her experience is the first in this series of 5 miracles demonstrating the power and goodness of God during this period in the northern kingdom of Israel, when there was no functioning priesthood. God raised up prophets such as Elisha, who travelled and taught at a group of schools, training young men in the ancient law, and who existed as a force for righteousness in the nation. Students were called sons of the prophets, and in this instance, one of them died, leaving his wife and 2 sons without adequate provision. At this time in Israel, a child could be sold into slavery. See Leviticus 25, verses 39 to 41, Deuteronomy 15:2, Jeremiah 34:9. This woman, who had lost her husband and her livelihood, and who now faced the prospect of losing her sons, exercised faith by coming to the man of God for advice. Willingly, she stepped out to do what she had been told to do, even though her actions appeared to be futile. When she started to pour the oil in the privacy of her home, under the watchful eye of her sons, she witnessed a miraculous display of God's abundant supply. Not only could she pay her debts and protect her family, but she had the means to support her sons until they could become wage earners. This widow exemplifies God's concern for women, even in an apostate nation. There is also the expectation for financial responsibility, even in poverty. Her faith was coupled with obedient action. This truly helpless woman was required simply to trust and obey. The second woman that we're looking at is often referred to as the Shunammite woman. She was a notable woman, and she and her elderly husband lived in the town of Shunem in southern Galilee, southeast of Mount Carmel. Their gracious home became a frequent way station for the prophet Elisha during his journeys throughout the countryside. Such hospitality to strangers in both Old and New Testaments was not optional. Genesis 18 verses 1 to 8, Deuteronomy 10, 17 to 19, Matthew 25, 35, Hebrews 13, 2. Eventually, the Shunammite woman decided to provide a more comfortable place for the prophet, a permanent enclosed structure, accessible by an outer stairway. Such accommodations were invaluable in a day when public lodging was very poor, if available at all. Elisha wanted to do something in return for her gracious hospitality, though she had asked for nothing. The observant servant Gehazi reminded Elisha that the Shunammite had no children, and infertility was, of course, a personal tragedy for certainly Israelite women, but really any women. Elisha announced to her that next year she would hold a son in her arms. She must have been stunned because she and her husband were old. In later years, the child fell ill while working with his father in the fields. He died in his mother's lap. In silent grief, the mother laid the boy on Elisha's bed and closed the door. With urgent determination, she sought the prophet. Did she question why God had given her a child, only to take him away from her? Was her swift determination to find Elisha the response of faith that the God who had used his prophet to promise her a child could also use his prophet to restore the child's life? She found Elisha and fell at his feet. Seeing her anguish, Elisha quickly ascertained that something was the matter with the boy. He asked Gehazi to go and lay his prophet's staff on the boy's face. But the Shunammite refused to leave Elisha. Together they began the journey back to Shunem. The mother waited anxiously outside the prophet's room, hoping, fearing, wondering. Meanwhile, Elisha prayed and the boy revived. Imagine the woman's elation at seeing her son, the child of promise, restored to life. While her actions clearly indicated she knew such a miracle was possible, the overwhelming joy at holding her child once again was indescribable. The woman's gracious provision for the Lord's prophet resulted in the coming of a precious son into her life. Though some consider namelessness as merely the absence of power, in this unnamed woman is the reward for a servant's heart, power with God, and gratitude from his prophet. Her inward beauty prompted outward duty. Elisha's inward virtue unfolded in outward deeds. The Shunammite woman's inward beauty was her servant's heart. Her outward duty, hospitality. Elisha's inward virtue was gratitude. His outward deeds, the gift of a son. The Shunammite's unsolicited hospitality awakened Elisha's thoughtful gratitude. Her proactive faith and confident determination in the midst of grief resulted in the restoration of her son's life. Thanks very much.